is, I think, unique to Eltonics as well. So Sarah, should we have a look at the learning aims for today?
No, because first I can't share my screen.
Right.
Paul, can you help me? Let me see.
Have you got the share screen?
Sorry, you can now. You should be able to now.
I can now.
Apologies.
Well, you know what? The answer, that's all right. The answer is still no, because you know what, Claire? Every single session I provide you all with the learning aims, and today I'm just not doing it. So our learning aims today are absolutely top secret.
What?
I know. All right, I'll give you a little hint. All right, but there's a secret word that you have to guess. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to understand the differences between taking immediate action and in our classrooms. So what do you think that top secret word might be? Then we're going to learn how to implement creative, who knows what, classroom practice. What is our second top secret words? And finally, we're going to look at ways to, who knows, creatively.
Could
so
be
it
a
is
number of things there. Amazing.
Could be anything, right? So as we go through the webinar today, we're going to invite you, when we return to these aims, to guess what our top secret words are. And of course, this is something that you can do with your students in your classrooms when you're sharing a little bit with that. All right then, so Claire, you said that today we're looking at CPD, right, which stands for continuous professional development.
Yes.
And there are tons and tons of different CPD models available to teachers, to teacher trainers or educators, to schools as well. And here are, well, probably most of them. It's not an exhaustive list, but we've got many there, in no particular order. So I've got a question for our participants. And the question is, which of these models have you had the most experience with? Okay, so if you've had most experience with perhaps peer observations, you might put 3 in the chat box. You might put more than 1 as well. And while our participants are doing that, Claire, I've got a question for you as well. So Claire, as a teacher, what are your experiences with these CPD models?
Well, I guess I've experienced all of them or most of them, but 1 or 2 stand out the most. I think number 2, observations from my managers. That's been a common thing throughout my career, and so it gives me a little bit of kind of nervous trauma when I think about it. I was always a bit nervous doing that. And insets, on the other hand, were fun, were really engaging, were really upbeat, and it was really nice to share with fellow peers. And of course, courses, Celta, Delta, Masters, those I've done as well. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, I guess I've had experience with most of them, and observations from manager kind of stands out because they are quite traumatic. Actually, you were my manager at one point doing these observations, Claire. So, you know,
I'm sorry for making that traumatic.
Got a bone to pick with you. Yeah. I guess, you know, there's also that observer's paradox, right? I feel like I can do something quite well when I'm not being watched, and then when someone watches me, it all kind of goes to pieces. And I guess personally, I really enjoy reading articles, but there's so many out there that it's quite hard to find one that matches my immediate needs. Webinars, I've got no idea. What's a webinar? I mean, is this a Gen Z thing?
No idea, Sarah, no idea.
Right. So Claire, going back to our participants now, what types of CPD have they had most experience with? What are they telling us?
I think a lot of people are saying 1 and 7. I think they're the most. I mean, a lot of people have done all of them as well, but 1 and 7 come through the most, which is quite self. It's all about, you know, getting to things yourself, isn't it? Rather than other people observing you or.
Yeah. Okay, so as Paul mentioned earlier, so we work at Eltonics, and Eltonics is a teacher development service, and we have the privilege of working very closely with individual teachers, right, in their development. And we want to introduce you today to 2 of those teachers.
Yeah, let's meet Joe. and Petra, they came to us with particular questions or particular problems they have in their classroom context. So Joe here, they've noticed that their students didn't like writing in class. And so they came with the question, how do I get my students to like writing? Okay. And then we have Petra, and she noticed that some students were challenged in her class and some students weren't. And her question is, how can I make sure all my students are challenged? Okay. So looking back at the CP models that Sarah showed us, and here they are numbered here on the screen, I'd question for the participants again, and you can write in the chat, which CPD model would you suggest they follow to address the problem? So for example, if you think Joe could benefit from doing a peer observation, you would write Joe 2, Petra 7. Got 1 and 2, 7 coming through. 4 critical fluency, 2, 7. 7's very popular. That's some action research. Peer observations quite popular as well, Sarah. Okay. So what do you think, Sarah? Do you agree with the participants? Do you think these are good ways to deal with Joe and Petra's challenges? Yeah.
No, none of them.
No.
None of them. No, absolutely
None
not.
of them?
None of them. None of them, Claire.
This is what we do in schools
I
all
know.
the time.
But I'm going to go against the grain and say none of them.
Wow.
None of them are suitable right now at all.
Okay.
And the reason for this, for me, is down to the questions that they're asking, right? So I don't think that Joe or Petra are asking the right kinds of questions. Let's have a look at the question again. So Joe asks, how do I get my students to like writing? And Petra asks, how can I make sure all my students are challenged? There are big problems with these questions. The first one is, both of these teachers have made too many assumptions. So Joe assumes that his students don't like writing, but how can they know that? And Petra assumes that all of their students are under challenged, right? But how does she know that? We can't really tell. So there's a danger in rushing to making an assumption. They're also then trying to find a quick fix. So they're rushing towards a CPD model. So for example, Joe came to us asking, you know, can I join your creative writing course? Are there other courses that you have? What articles can I read? What webinars can you point me to? And Petra came asking us for several observations, but we haven't really got the right question yet. So there's no point in rushing to a CPD model. So it's about asking the right questions.
Okay, all right. Okay, Sarah, if we change the question word from how to why, does that make you happier?
Yeah, it's made my day. Yeah. So if we change the question to, for Joe, in Joe's case, why don't my students want to engage with writing? And in Petra's case, why is there differentiation in my classroom? This now leaves a lot of room for creative thought, right? And this goes back to our previous webinars a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Let's have a look at the 3 ways we've approached encouraging creative thinkers in our previous webinars. So those of you that have come to our previous webinars might know the words underneath here. Those that haven't, you can go back and see them on our recorded videos. So anyway, let's have a look. These are the 3 ways we think we can develop creative thinkers in class, and what we've talked about a lot in this series. The first one is encourage teachers and students to, and we have 2 missing words here. What do you think they are? Write them in the chat. Encourage teachers and students to observe. Yes, Marianne is spot on there. Not engage. No. Evaluate. No. Explore. Someone wrote that. That was really quickly. I didn't see who wrote that, but yes, it's to observe and explore. Then we have the second one, which is apply certain when solving problems. Constraints from Paula there, wonderful, excellent. And the final one is foster a sense of something and encourage something. Wonder from Debbie, excellent. And lots of curiosity coming in, wonderful, excellent, yeah. Foster a sense of wonder and creativity and curiosity, sorry, someone wrote creativity and it wasn't that, it was curiosity. Wonderful. Okay, so by asking the question why and implementing these approaches, we're moving away from taking immediate action and moving more to exploring and observing our current classrooms. All right, what are our aims then? What we got, Sarah?
They were top secret. So let's have a look at the first one then. We said today we will understand the differences between taking immediate action and what do you think my top secret word is based on what we've done so far?
Observing, coming in, observations, solutions. It's exploring.
It's exploring, yeah. So instead of rushing to act, we're going to sit back, first of all, and actually explore and observe, of course. And we've got our familiar confidence thermometer. So let's have a look at this aim so far. How do you feel about this? Do you feel like you still need a little bit of help with this? In which case you will write yellow in the chat. If you think, all right, I've got this, I get it, then pink. And if you think that you could go into your school and teach another teacher about this, then pop white in the chat. What have we got coming through, Claire? What colours? Pink.
Pinks, lots of pinks, couple of yellows, a white coming through.
We're going to pass the host to that person.
Yeah, let's hand over now. Lots of pinks and a few yellows. All right. and dotted with whites. Yeah.
All right, so we've got two more aims to look at. And remember that we'll come back and we're going to ask you once again for the top secret word.
Yeah. Okay. So at Eltonics, we really encourage teachers and students to explore the current classroom situation, to really observe closely from different perspectives. So let's have a look at this. How do we do that? Well, there are a few of our ideas here, and of course, they're creative activities that you can use to do just that, to encourage yourself to explore and observe your current practice, your current classroom. So let's go through them. The first one is that you could write a description of your last class or last week's classes from your students' perspectives. What would be their highlights, do you think? And what things would they say that they didn't enjoy? A second activity we have is to look at the materials you've used in class recently. And which ones would you put in your outbox? Never again. And which in your inbox? This is a keeper. A third activity is looking back at your class or lesson procedure, your lesson plan. Take some colour pencils. What colours come to mind for each stage of the lesson? Why? What do you associate with each colour? Our fourth activity we have here is regarding your classes as if they were an ice skating performance. So which stages of the lessons would be beautiful to watch and which stages with the ice skaters slip? And another one is imagining a genie appears to you and grants you 3 wishes. What would they be for your classroom? And finally, we've got here, and there are many more ideas that we have, but these are just a few for you. You could record a lesson or a series of lessons. Look specifically at the students and think, what do they find interesting, boring, or challenging, or easy, whatever it is you're looking at. Okay.
Yeah, Claire, you can experiment with all of these different activities, right? In all different kinds of classes. And remember, they are for you as the teacher to explore and to observe what's going on. So earlier we introduced you to Joe and Petra. Claire, what did Joe and Petra choose?
Okay, so Joe chose to answer the ice skating performance. Well, he carried out that ice skating performance activity, and this is what he said. He said, if my classes were an ice skating performance, the beautiful bits to watch would be my visuals and how they engage the students, the classroom dynamic being fun and safe, and my students doing well in speaking tasks when they plan what to write. The bits when the ice skater slips is when the students start writing because they do not engage. So from Joe's perspective there, what's their focus, Sarah?
Well, I guess from observing what's going on in the classroom, Joe has now identified the area of focus as being connected to writing, right? How to engage students in writing lessons where they don't seem to be currently.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And then Petra chose the genie activity, and upon reflecting on her class and then reflecting on classes, a series of classes, she wishes that all her students could feel equally challenged, even though they have different strengths. She wishes that her students all got a sense of progression when they walk out the classroom. And 3, I wish I could reach every student and their needs in classes. So Sarah, what would be the area of focus for Petra to work with?
Well, it seems like, once again, after observing what's going on in that class, it's something to do with the level of challenge, isn't it? Exactly. Whether she's challenging her students enough, not enough.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so we've looked at encouraging teachers to observe and explore by using these creative activities to do so. But how can we foster a sense of wonder and encourage curiosity, Sarah?
I'm glad you asked. No, so in previous sessions, we've talked a lot about the importance of questioning, right? Creative questioning.
Yeah.
And well, in other words, questions that help us wonder and become curious about something. So in order to do this in CPD, Smith and Ribolledo say that there are 3 ways to create exploratory questions. In other words, questions which help us wonder about our current practice, get curious about our practice, and explore our practice. And as we explore, we need to take into consideration behavior, other people's perspectives, and our own. So Claire, I'm going to give you some examples of exploratory questions, and I want you to tell me whether you think they're questions which explore behavior, questions which explore others' perceptions, or whether they're questions that explore your own. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so these questions, what do I mean by what do I think or feel about? What do I think? Why do I think ... happens? What do I want to see happening instead of? What do you think that is?
I think that's exploring my perceptions as a teacher. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Okay. And then if we take these, what do my students think or feel about, or even what do my colleagues think of?
You're asking for others' perceptions there.
Yes, good. And then of course, when or how often does such and such happen? What do I do and say when such and such occurs? Or what do my students do or say when such and such occurs? Is
it's behavior. Yeah, it's looking at the classroom as a whole. Yeah,
exactly. And we need absolutely to have all 3 of these when we explore. So when we explore our own perceptions, this is really important because it helps you identify why a situation or an issue is important to you, what you understand about it, and what you expect. And this really comes into play if you're unhappy about something or worried about something and so on. But we can't just leave it there, because otherwise we would start assuming things, which is what we don't want to do. So we also need to explore others' perceptions of the same situation. This is really important because you need to know what your learners and sometimes their parents or your colleagues think and feel in a particular situation to get the full picture, to fully understand it. And then, of course, behavior, how we act and how other people act is really important, because by exploring your students and also your own behavior, you're going to get a clearer picture of what actually happens in the classroom, what you do and what your students do.
Mhm.
So it's important to have a particular question or questions that you can later try and answer. But the key thing is that this is with evidence. So we're getting away from assumptions and we're going towards evidence. So let's go back to Joe. And remember that Joe's area of focus was student engagement in writing lessons, okay? And here are some exploratory questions that Joe could ask. Claire, you're going to help me with these questions. You're going to say if they are exploring my perceptions, in other words, Joe's perceptions, others' perceptions, or behavior, okay?
Got it.
And participants, of course, you can help us out. So the first one is, at what stage of the lesson students lose interest?
What stage of the lesson do my students lose interest? What do we think? Yeah, I think it's behavior, isn't it? It's watching what the students are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. And what do my students think of writing lessons?
Well, that's asking their opinion, asking their perception. So others'
Okay.
perceptions. Yeah.
So then, of course, what do I think is a successful and engaging writing lesson is your own perception. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we had Petra. And remember that Petra's area of focus was dealing with the level of challenge in her class. And we're going to do the same thing with some exploratory questions to help us out here, help Claire out. The first one is, what do my students do when they are or aren't challenged enough?
That do thing. Yeah, behavior, lots of behaviors coming in. I agree.
Lovely. All right then. And then what are the reasons for my students not being challenged or too challenged?
You'd have to ask the students that. So that would be exploring others' perceptions. Yeah.
Good. So then finally, Petra's own, to explore her own perception, it would be what makes me think that my students are not challenged.
Yeah.
So as exploring other people's perceptions and behavior is crucial, and not just our own as teachers, which is what I used to do for sure, we need to provide students with the opportunity to voice their thoughts, right? We need to really listen to our students' points of view. So Claire, how can we do this? How can we find out what our students think?
There are huge amounts of ways that we can do this, but we are going to look at our top 5 and a sense of wonder and reflect on the lessons for our students' voices, to get our students' voices and perceptions. The first one is material map. And this is where we can get the students to lay out the materials from the lesson from beginning to end in order. And you're all around one table, all the classes around one table doing this together. The students then individually take a green, a yellow, a pink sticky note and place them next to the materials. Now you could have something general, like green means I enjoyed it, yellow, it was okay, pink, I didn't like it. Or you could adapt this to something where you're focusing on a particular thing, like Petra is focusing on challenge. So she might want to choose the green post-it note or sticky note means just right, yellow means too easy, pink is too difficult. Once all the students have done that for every material, the teacher can then see where the most sticky notes are and start to ask students follow-up questions about certain materials. For example, the ones that received mostly yellow, why was this too easy? Why do you find it too easy? The second activity we have is the teacher or student voiceover. So here we elicit different stages or activities from the lesson, from the students, and either write these up on the board or show them. And then the teacher sits in the middle of the classroom and points to each activity or each stage of the lesson. And the students come up with a teacher voiceover. So what they believe you were thinking at that time in the lesson. And then you can confirm or correct and use this to stimulate discussion. Equally, the students could give their own voiceovers from their own perspectives for each stage or activity, or of course their peers as well. Another favourite activity of ours is text messaging. So we ask the students to write a short text message to an absent student, describing what happened in the lesson and how they felt about it and why. And of course, the absent student can then ask questions like, why do you think the teacher said or did this at this stage of the lesson? For younger learners here, they can get a postcard and draw a picture of their favourite part of the lesson on the front of the postcard, and then write a little short description on the back why they liked it. And we have this activity to get our students' voices. Why did you? So at the end of the lesson, give students 5 minutes to think about the lesson and provide them with the sentence stem, why did you? Give them time to come up with questions about your lesson that you can answer for them. Now, do the same for the students and ask them. So for example, why did you all start talking during the writing stage? Now, it's important here to highlight to the students that there's no judgment here. You're just exploring, you're just finding out. And finally, we have our activity, which is video recording. So you can record the lesson with the students, of course, with parent or guardian consent. Watch the video alone first and isolate parts that you as the teacher have questions about, and then just replay these parts to the students and invite them to comment on the segment, find out what they were thinking or doing at that stage.
And Claire, these are lovely activities, if we do say so ourselves, because they can be used with students of all ages, right? They can be adapted to work with primary, secondary and adult education as well.
Yeah. Going back to Joe and Petra though, which activity did they choose to hear their students' voices?
Okay, so Joe decides to experiment with the why did you activity. Okay, and they ask the class, why did you start talking in the writing stage? And this is Joe's student Ali, and Ali says, well, I started talking in the writing stage because I was asking my friend for some ideas and help. I like it when we work together in class, but writing is always done alone. Sometimes I don't know what we're writing for and who I'm writing to. So this is what Ali says in reaction to Joe's question. And then Petra decides to use the post-it notes, the materials map. And because Petra is really sort of thinking about level of challenge, she decides to have a look at what the students found too difficult, too easy, and just right. And this activity was too easy for the students. A lot of students said that this was too easy. It's a little matching task where students have to match the word to the picture, very common in kind of young learner classrooms. And when she asked about this activity, why was it too easy? Her student Maria says, well, we always do matching and it helps me understand the words, but I can't use them when I speak. Mm-hmm. So now the students' opinions are really coming through. But if we focus on Joe, just for now, Claire, what was Joe's perspective? We've got Ali's, but what was Joe's?
Well, he had the original exploratory question, what do I think is a successful and engaging writing lesson? And upon reflection, they said, I think it's when my learners like the topic so much that their heads are down and they can't stop writing. And then, of course, if we compare that to Joe's student Ali, they're very different. And this is often what happens, isn't it, Sarah? The perceptions are different. So Joe talks about heads down, writing alone, can't stop writing, and it's all about the topic, thinks that the topic is the problem that's stopping this happen. Whereas Ali says, well, actually, I really like working with my friends, collaborative writing, and actually, I don't know who I'm writing to and what I'm writing for. So they're very different things, very different perspectives. If Joe had on their own perspective and their own perceptions, he would have planned and delivered a writing lesson on a topic the children chose. And of course, the topic, as we know from listening to Ali, isn't the problem. So this is where we now need to apply some constraints.
Okay. So Claire, so Joe didn't rush off to take action immediately. What did they end up doing?
Okay. So they end up doing, in the next writing class, Joe shares the writing objectives with the students. So the purpose for writing, who they're writing to, what they expect in the writing, etc., and invites the students to add any more as well. And then after the students have written, they use this as a checklist to self-reflect. And if you haven't already tuned into our creative feedback webinar, which was our last webinar, there's some great ideas to deal with this area, if it is indeed your problematic area that you're exploring, of course, from getting your students' perspectives as well as your own. So do you like this, Sarah?
I do, yes. I'm much happier now, Claire, than right at the beginning of the webinar, for sure.
Good,
it's
I'm
interesting
glad.
to see what Joe did, but I think it's also interesting to kind of discuss what they didn't do, right? And they didn't change everything about their practice. So Joe decides just to share the writing objectives. They don't change everything about what they're doing in the classroom. They don't assume that every group of learners that they teach need the same intervention with writing. So it's really focused on this group of learners that they got the feedback from. They didn't act on just their own perceptions, because then we would have gone down the garden path of changing the topic, acting too quickly. They didn't go into panic mode, I don't think, and do a gazillion courses on how to teach writing and or watch 4 webinars on writing and, you know, get overwhelmed and a little bit burnt out, which is what happens a lot in continuous professional development. And they didn't assume, and this is really important, that this was the correct and only intervention that would solve the problem, because Joe tries it in the next writing class as opposed to all of them. We're going to come back to that comment in a moment. So in other words, they're applying constraints, right?
Yeah. So if we look at step 3, applying constraints as a summary. So we're changing one thing at a time, not everything. So Joe didn't change the topic, didn't change the course book, didn't change how types of writing texts that the students wrote all at the same time. They just changed the purpose and reason for writing and did that little activity. The action you take should be specific to the group of learners you've explored with. So dealing with one class, not thinking that that's the answer for all classes. Every class is different. And the action you implement should address the students' perspectives and needs. So in other words, you don't have complete freedom to act only on your own perspective. And of course, we've mentioned that that's moving towards assuming a little bit too much. and then try and refrain from accessing every CPD initiative possible to have this quick fix. Of course, you can tune into wonderful webinars like this one to help you, you know, choose the right way or right action to implement in the classroom, but don't go nuts, because as Sarah said, that can turn into burnout on an already heavy workload as teachers.
Bit of a shameless plug there, Claire.
It was.
Yeah.
There's more coming as well. There's more coming.
All right then. So we've of course understood, or hopefully understood, the differences between taking immediate action and exploring our classrooms. We've just learned how to implement creative. What's the top secret word there?
Yeah. Let's see what people say. How to implement creative. We've only got hi from Mohammed.
It's not hi, but it is exploratory classroom.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, we've got some Benjamin exploration. Yeah, great.
Lovely. All right. So just thinking about that second aim then, learning how to implement creative exploratory classroom practice. Think about how confident you feel with this. Once again, down here, yellow means that you need a bit more help with this, and that's fine. Pink, I've got this. And white, I can totally deliver the next webinar on this. So write your color in the chat box. And while we do that, we're going to come to the final aim of today's session, which is look at ways to creatively.
Okay, we've got lots of pinks coming through, Sarah. I'd say pink is the favorite color.
Super, super, super. So we mentioned earlier that, you know, taking Joe again, it wasn't the end of the story for Joe and their students once they'd made that classroom change. And Joe doesn't assume that the action or change will address the issue. They try it in the next writing class, but the exploring absolutely does not end there. So the students and the teacher now need to reflect on the success of the action or change before Joe applies it to other lessons and students. So we can, of course, creatively, of course, as teachers, reflect and encourage our students to reflect as well, using some of the same tools. So should we take a look at those tools?
Okay.
Here they are. These are my reflection tools for both teachers and students to creatively reflect on the action or change. What do you notice about these, Claire?
Well, stop the bus and shut the front door. They're the same as ones we used for the teacher to explore and observe the classroom.
Yeah, exactly right. So those tools that we have at our disposal to help us observe the classroom, to observe behavior, can also be used once again to reflect on that change. So we've got 5 options here. They're all equally valid. Which one do you think Joe should choose to reflect on their classroom change? Put your thoughts in the chat box, participants. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Claire, which one do you like out of these?
I think in relation to Joe, because they're looking at a particular material that they used, I would choose number 2, or possibly number 3. Yeah,
Lovely. All right.
I like the colours, and I think you're going a little bit deeper with those colours and thinking why you feel that way. I like that one.
Absolutely, yeah. You're exploring your feelings in relation to something, aren't you? Yeah, totally. And we've got a range of preferences from the participants as well. I mean, they're all valuable, they're all valid. So to kind of wrap up then, let's just recap on those steps of creative exploratory classroom practice. The first one, of course, step 1, is to encourage the teacher to observe and explore what's going on at the moment in the classroom.
And then step 2 is foster a sense of wonder and encourage curiosity, particularly through exploratory questions and looking at others' perspectives.
Then step 3 is to act within certain constraints. So you don't change up everything. You don't change everything with every class. The changes that you make are in relation to what your students have told you as well. And you don't start kind of clutching at every single CPD option available to you because there are too many.
Yeah.
And then finally,
we then, because we've acted and we've changed something or we've implemented something in class that's different, then we need to reflect on the effect of that, and we can encourage teacher and students to reflect on this particular action with the tools we've just looked at.
all right then. So I've got a final top secret word. What do you think it is? Yes, immediately. Oh, we've got wiggle. I wish it was wiggle. That's webinar number 6, I think. It is reflect. Yeah, so we've looked at ways to reflect creatively as teachers, and they can also be used with students. Once again, and for the final time, think about how you feel now, your confidence in relation to these aims. If you still need a bit of help with this, put yellow in the chat box. If you definitely got it, put pink. And if you could teach a colleague of yours about what you learned today, pop white in the chat box.
Yay, got pinks, got a couple of whites too. That's great.
Super, super, super. All right then.
Excellent. We did refer to a really wonderful PDF, a free PDF that you can get on this link that we have on the screen here from the British Council. It's a handbook for exploratory action research. It's superlative. If you can get your hands on that, please do. And it does pick up on most of the things that we've looked at in terms of exploring the classroom and taking action and reflecting and observing. And if you did write a yellow or a pink and your final reflection on this webinar, you might want to join us on our next Eltonics Bites short course. It's 6 hours of 3 2-hour sessions, and it's on exactly this, exploratory action research and practice, your professional development. It's on Saturdays 9 to 11 UK time. As the 15th, 22nd and 29th of October, and please email Sarah if you're interested in joining. Or indeed, if you want to carry out your exploratory classroom practice with Eltonics, you can visit our website to find out how. This is what we do. We consider we're experts on it, and you'll have a great time doing it. So thank you so much for attending our webinar.
Yes, thank you very much for giving the webinar, Claire. So,
you're welcome. Thanks for inviting us.
Tell you what, I don't know if you want to just stick up that last slide again, just really quickly with the links and stuff, so people can see it, because sometimes people are watching if they want to, on a mobile, if they want to take a screenshot or whatever, then eltonics.com.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, I did put a link into the bites, Eltonics Bites, geez, short courses anyway.
I know, it's our webinars, Paul.
My
they
brain,
leave people speechless.
Yeah,
that is it. My brain is full of reflection and wiggling. So it was lovely. Really enjoyed that, and some fantastic advice on on reflective practice, action research, on everything really in terms of professional development and how to sort of make it creative. And I think, lovely how you sort of started off with the question. I mean, it's often what kind of, I don't know, kind of leads to effective professional development is asking the right questions, and then, as you've kind of shown throughout the session, sort of, the ways to answer that question, but deciding on what the question should be first is vital, and then the different techniques. So some lovely techniques, lovely sort of ideas that I've never really sort of thought about, I suppose, in all my years of professional development. So great, thank you. Questions, if we've got any questions for the presenters, because at the minute the only one I've got is, can we get a PDF version of the presentation? That's from Kirsten, and the answer to that is yes. There will be a version of this presentation available to you tomorrow, along with the recording. Almudena says it's been very short, this presentation.
We can keep going. I mean,
Oh,
how
yeah.
long?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's a sort of, you mean that in a positive way, Almudena? Well, you know, it's like the time's gone
Short
really
and sweet.
quickly, yeah, rather than it's like, you know, I mean, that's how I'm interpreting it. I think maybe you should as well. I'm just putting some more links in just while we're waiting
Don't
for
make
questions.
assumptions, Paul. It's all been about not making
I
assumptions.
know. I didn't ask the right question. What would be the right question? Someone at the end of the class says, well, that was short. What would be the right question to ask yourself as a teacher if your learners
Why
said
do you
that?
feel that was short?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put a sticky note next to that with
Okay.
your answer. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that advice. There you go. It's been short because they are wonderful, in capital letters from Almudena. So there you go. So my assumption, wrongly made an assumption, but it was the right assumption. So that was, you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, someone's just said the certificate date is June 2022. Pretty sure it doesn't. Let me just check.
I do see a question there, Paul, from
Please.
Benjamin. What if the students are not adept in the language? So I guess
Like low-level learners.
Low-level learners, yeah. I mean, these what we say a lot. These are metacognitive skills that you're developing yourself and with the students as well. It's all metacognitive stuff, and that can be done in the L1 if you know your students L1, or if it's a monolingual class. It doesn't have to be conducted in English until students have kind of got into the swing of it. It really doesn't. It's just data that you're collecting, which helps you reflect and helps them reflect. Doesn't matter what language it's in. It sort of wraps around your English language content. So yeah, I mean, this can be done with any level of student, any age, but you would just adapt or use a different language for sure.
Okay. Sorry, I got sidetracked by someone saying that the certificate says June 2022. Definitely doesn't. This is the link to the certificate. I'm just putting it in. Below that, Ayat has asked, could you please explain what's meant by ice skating performance?
This is a creative activity to explore what's happening in the classroom. So you imagine that your lesson is an ice skating performance, and you note down the bits of your lesson or the activities in your lesson or the stages in your lesson that were beautiful, with the ice skater gliding, and it was all lovely to watch. And then you write down the bits where the ice skater slipped. So what was that activity, or what was that stage that it didn't quite go according to plan, or the students didn't behave a certain way that you thought they were going to, or they weren't engaged, or they were a bit bored, etc. Yeah.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question about ice skating performance. Question. So we are streaming to Facebook, so there are some questions that have come in from participants watching on Facebook. Sorry, I can't pronounce the name because it's written in a different alphabet, different script. Students in the 9th form. It sounds Greek. I don't know. Can you, Sarah? You live in Greece. Okay.
Oh, pressure's on now. You're testing my Greek for.
Okay, so I just put in. I know. I've just put the name in the chat. Can you pronounce that for me?
I can't see it.
Oh, maybe it isn't Greek. Maybe it's anyway. Should I just ask the question? Maybe that's the best thing. Students in the 9th form do a lot of, and I do a lot of activities in the class, but the lesson isn't interesting for them. What to do? Now I've sort of had a couple of questions, and I've sent people to the recordings of your previous webinars, because there's quite a big question, and because this is sort of particularly about ideas for CPD rather than sort of how to make things interesting for the students, because you sort of covered that, I think. And
it's also highlighting an assumption, because you're assuming that your students are not interested or not motivated, and your assumption might be right because you're observing a particular behavior, but then you can't assume what the reason is for that. You have to ask them, which is what classroom-based, you know, what creative exploratory, what we did today. It's all about that, right? So, you know, my students are not motivated, so this won't work. Well, this is exactly why you should be doing this, because you need to figure out why your students aren't motivated, and you won't know unless you ask them.
Yeah.
No matter the class size, right?
Yeah.
You can do this with any kind of number of students in your lesson.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. I believe is the name. Someone's already done it. Someone's already translated it. Nadezhda. Thank you for translating it. But yeah, Mary Niezhova, that question was from. Thank you. Large classes. This is a question that comes up a lot. I guess, I mean, the techniques that you've been talking about, that's, you know, small classes, large classes, you know, the reflective practice, the way to go about being creative with CPD, it makes no difference on the class size particularly, does it?
No, and our next webinar's on that, right?
It is.
It's on, yeah.
Being creative with...
Being creative with large classes, yeah. But yeah, no, referring to the actual CPD session we've just done, yeah, absolutely, it can be with large classes, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions